came across an article this week from Polygon, written by Susanna Polo, and it kind of made a little bit of a splash on some of my online circles this week. I saw it a lot on Twitter, people quoting it and sharing it. And I got to admit, when I first saw it, I kind of laughed it off because, and to be honest, it was because there was a little bit of a clickbaity blurb attached to the socials that they put out. Basically paraphrasing, it said the Eagles and Lord of the Rings are a plot hole, and we need to get over it. so that right off the bat, it just it got me. That's one of those things I mentioned up at the top of the show that because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I love Lord of the Rings, and I know that they're not a plot hole. So every time I see that gets me.
Mm-hmm.
So I laughed it off at that point. And I basically felt like I knew what this article was going to say before I read it. I thought I knew what it was going to say before I read it. And it wasn't until a couple hours later that I saw someone else share it, mention it. Shout out here to Timothy Drennan from the As Father and Son podcast. But then I really gave it a shot, and then it made more sense. I don't want to give away the whole article because I do think that you should read it for yourself. But what I will say is that Polo arrives at the conclusion that plot holes are largely a matter of your point of view. So I figured that sounded something like that we should probably talk about.
Probably.
Yeah, so I sent this article over to Josh, and he agreed, and so here we are. So today we're going to dive into the idea of plot holes, and even talk about a few that stick out to us. We also, I'll skip that since we didn't get any voicemails.
Yeah.
So today we're going to dive into the idea of plot holes and even talk a little bit about a few that stick out to us. And to start off, we should probably kind of get an idea of what a plot hole actually is. So I went and looked and found a little bit of a definition to go on for us. And this is from Wikipedia that says, in fiction, a plot hole or plot error is a gap or inconsistency in a storyline that goes against the flow of logic established by the story's plot. Such inconsistencies include things as illogical, unlikely, or impossible events, and statements or events that contradict earlier events in the storyline. So I'm sure right off the bat you have a couple popping into your head, but I wanted to start with the one that was in the Polygon article, the idea of Eagles in Lord of the Rings. Why couldn't they just carry the ring themselves? Or, carry Sam and Frodo and save a little bit of walking, make things a little bit easier. Because, that's honestly something that becomes a sticking point for a lot of people to watch these movies. Those Eagles just kind of come in at the end and take Frodo off Mount Doom. They save Gandalf from the top of Orthanc. And, it begs the question. What I will say at this point is that the Eagles designed by Tolkien weren't ever really meant to be servants. First of all, they do favors, and Gandalf has a few stored up, I guess. But a couple things to remember is that first of all, the Eagles weren't immune to the ring's power either, so them carrying the ring or being tempted by the ring was a real threat. Second of all, I think it can be summed up from one of Gandalf's quotes in Fellowship of the Ring. Keep it secret, keep it safe. That was really the idea of this whole thing, is to do this as a secret mission so that Sauron would not know that the ring was still around and would not know where to find it. Because if he knew where to find it, all the fury of Mordor would be unleashed, on that particular spot. So that's mainly the idea, And then also remember, Sauron has fell beasts, that the ring wraiths, the Nazgul can ride on as well. So it's not just as easy as the good guys have the wings and you can fly it in that way. It's not quite that easy. So basically that would be the explanation right there. But the fact of the matter is, though, and there's always going to be a casual fan that just doesn't read that far into it. There's going to be in-universe explanations like that. There may even be in-film explanations like the one that I mentioned about Gandalf. I think that kind of explains it right there, like I said. But if you're just kind of there for the cool action scenes, and the cute elves, whether that's Elrond or Arwen, it doesn't really matter. Chances are those reasons
Legolas.
don't matter much to you. I guess Legolas is there too. But chances are those actual reasons probably don't matter much to you. Josh, why don't you talk a little bit about the next one, because I know our friend Steve was talking to me about this one as well.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just going to talk about my position on plot holes just a little bit.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm sure we're going to get
and
back to that at the end too when we
yeah,
summarize
yeah,
this all
yeah.
up.
Um, there's it's not something I normally pay too much attention to. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of that eagle thing. I mean, I might have like briefly thought about it and then just been like, well, it wouldn't be much of a movie if they just flew this eagles to Mordor and that was it. But then that's my take on it usually. But I agree with what you said about the Lord of the Rings one, because it all is about secrecy, and it's all about, destroying the ring in secret. So for me, that's a good enough explanation. But going on to the next one, the Prisoner of Azkaban, I guess, Hermione throughout the film uses a time turner to go kind of back in time so she can kind of be in two places at once. She's able to take more classes this way and everything. But eventually, Dumbledore suggests that they should use this time turner to go back and change a couple things, just so maybe a couple lives could be saved. Sirius's life, and Buckbeak as
Buckbeak.
well.
Buckbeak.
Um, yeah. So, it's for reasons that are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for?
Trivial.
Um, yeah, maybe. But I was gonna say more like, they were good natured. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay,
and
okay, I see what you mean.
yeah. Um, but so the question is, why didn't they use the time turner to go back and prevent Voldemort from killing his parents, or prevent him from at least coming back in the Goblet of Fire when he comes back and kills Cedric Diggory and everything? So I did find a couple possible explanations to this, and one is that time turners can only be used to affect a recent period of time. So, like, there was one suggestion, um, that was like they can only be used for like the past 5 hours of time or something like that. So it couldn't even be used to go back that far. Um, Another suggestion was, and when I was talking to Brittany about this, because she's a huge Harry Potter fan, she had said that, Hermione was only using the time turner in the way Dumbledore directed her to. So he probably wouldn't have directed her to, um, go back and change all these different things that could mess up the timeline potentially.
Yeah. I'll mention the 5 hour thing. I'm pretty sure is a length of time that they can stay in the past.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay.
there's different levels of time travel in Harry Potter, and the time turner one, the user can start to get like side effects, or I don't know what I want to say, the negative effects,
Hmm.
traveling longer than 5 hours. Then they did, I guess, because I was researching this also. I guess they did develop um, time travel later that could let the user stay an infinite time, as long as they wanted in the past. But I did also find some stuff about this, that there are rules around time travel in Harry Potter. The Ministry of Magic basically wanted things like this to be used for trivial matters only, which is what I was thinking when you mentioned that
Yeah.
earlier. Um, so, Hermione taking tests, or studying, or taking an extra class is a little more trivial than going back and saving lives. Now Dumbledore, we know, is not always one to follow the rules.
This is true.
So I think that's kind of where that comes up. However, the other thing about this is what it affects. And, I always think about that butterfly effect term, and you go farther
Hmm.
back and you stop Harry's parents from dying, or, you go back and kill Voldemort as a baby. There's that that
Right.
idea
Like
too,
like like
like
baby
the
Hitler.
Hitler, yeah. Um, there's that type of stuff too. Like the farther back you go, the more things like that you do, even if it's good natured, it has a better chance of affecting a lot of things down the road.
Mhm.
Uh, so what they're really trying to avoid is kind of breaking time and creating alternate timelines, that type of stuff. So for me, that's a possible explanation, and for me, that helps it sit fine. That it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me. That actually didn't bother me until I was talking to our friend Steve that was mentioning this. I didn't even think about that really. Um, just
Yeah,
kind
same
of
here.
yeah, just really
It
kind of
never
took it at
never popped into my mind.
yeah, I just kind of really took it at face value, to be honest.
Hmm.
Um, and getting that little research that I did this past week helped me feel even better about it, I guess. But I mean, that's kind of the thing that comes back to what can you tolerate as a viewer. It's not even really how much of a fan you are or how willing you are to accept it. It's what can you tolerate.
Hmm.
I
Now,
Go ahead.
I will say that for the next two movies we're going to talk about, these are ones that have kind of bothered me just a little bit or come into my mind at least, things that I've been aware of when I watch them. But was there more you wanted to say about the Harry Potter thing?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Um, so the next one is Back to the Future, and I always think about this one. Um, why don't Marty's parents recognize that he
I
that
have
he gets
thought
older,
about that. Yeah.
that he looks like the Calvin
Hmm.
Klein that they met back in the 50s and everything. And I have no idea. Like,
Like they even went so far to name their kid after him. So
right, right,
like
right.
I've always thought, maybe it was just like a separation of time thing. But then
Yeah,
he was so
yeah.
important to them that they named their kid,
Right, right, right.
or not really after him, but um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I have thought about that too.
Hmm. Yeah, my only explanation was they simply forgot, over time. But like you said,
I was
so
thinking,
that's a little bit of this could be a plot hole actually.
yeah,
This
like
one.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, and none of this is to say, and I even had this written down to say later, but I'll say it now. Like, none of this is to say that plot holes don't exist. Plot holes do
Hmm.
exist. They can exist. They're going to always possibly exist. Um, it really just comes down to what you're okay with. And for me, I have thought about this one before. Not even really reading anything about it, just kind of thinking about it. Why don't they remember him later? Why doesn't why don't they think, man, our son really looks like Calvin Klein?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. For me, I just was able to kind of put it out of my head, and I guess thinking about it more, I guess the farther you get away from an event, the fuzzier your memory of it becomes. Um, maybe his mom does think every once in a while, Marty does kind of look like
Oh,
Calvin
he kind of
Klein,
looks.
but she also drinks a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at the beginning of the movie, anyway.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that, but then it's also like I know thinking back, I could think of someone that I knew 20 years ago, and their facial details don't always stick with you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The general picture, the general idea, but you don't know the actual details.
Hmm.
So maybe she thinks it, and she's like, maybe it's just me, my imagination, or something like that, and
Yeah,
she just
like
kind
no,
of
that'd
puts
be
it out of her head.
crazy.
Yeah,
It can't be the same person.
yeah,
Um,
right.
no, I think you nailed it, man. Really, because
I don't know. Like, it's just that's what I was
I
thinking about
think,
today.
yeah, no, but I'm thinking, 17, 18, 20 years back, like you're right, the details of the person's face and everything are going to be a little fuzzy. So,
Right.
I think I'm satisfied now with this one. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I told you guys out there listening that we were
We're
going to
gonna
solve all the
fix
plot
it
holes.
all.
Um, this next one does bother me a bit more than the others. And it's the reason it bothers me is because George Lucas made Return of the Jedi
Yeah.
before Revenge of the
This
Sith,
one bothers me too.
had a chance to make this make sense, but still chose to not have it not make sense. So my
Happy
question
birthday,
is,
George, by the way. His
yeah,
birthday
happy
was
birthday.
yesterday.
Um, how does Leia remember her mother? in Return of the Jedi when she speaks to Luke and says, she did remember her. Luke didn't have any memory of her. When Padme died, like right after giving birth to them, how does Leia remember her mother and everything?
I got nothing for you.
So yeah, I don't really
I
have.
do have a couple for you. So, and I think these are ones that I've heard along the way. But I mean, Force visions. She could have that Force sensitivity, or seeing the past, that type of thing. She does also say, mostly pictures, images, that type of stuff. So, maybe she's seeing images of her mother, like actual just pictures of her mother,
Maybe, yeah.
like hollows or whatever, they would be for them. It could be that type
could
of
be.
stuff. However, I totally agree, because in Jedi, it does imply that she had actual memories of her.
Yeah.
That implication is there. So for me, that has bugged me also.
Yeah, that one bugs me a little. Not a lot of plot holes bug me. This one.
But you said that's just an example of, we have a couple explanations there that are kind of plausible in-universe explanations, and we're both still kind of about it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting stuff.
I remember, speaking of Star Wars, before we move on, we had a friend in high school that couldn't watch Star Wars because he was a science buff, and sound can't happen in space, So any explosions or any pew pews or anything like that, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. Never mind that the rest of the story is about space wizards and laser swords and everything else. And a guy kept alive in a breather suit because he was burned to death on a in a lava pit.
Yeah, we're being frozen in carbonite.
It's the explosions in space that did it for him.
Yeah, that was the deal breaker.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something. No, it doesn't bother me at all. But I mean, I don't know if you need an explanation. I don't know. Like, obviously that universe operates different than ours, on some level. I don't know. But that's one of those things that it's just. Sometimes I guess the best explanation is it's just a movie.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be fun.
Now, I do want to dive a little bit into Avengers End Game. And this is another movie that deals with time travel. And so it can be a little bit confusing. And maybe
time travel is always sticky. Even Back to the Future stuff is sticky, especially when they go to the future,
Yeah, and this for me just could be the viewer. That could be me, like not wrapping my head around the way they're using time travel and the way things work exactly.
I don't know. I just go back to it's a movie. That's
yeah, because I love this movie and I just watched it like last week and I absolutely adore this movie. But I've always wondered like how exactly Thanos and his entire army travels into the future near the end of the film to face off with the Avengers and everything at the end. So I know the Nebula, like the past Nebula takes the present Nebula's quantum compass wristband thingy. And I'd never saw this before. I don't know why I didn't notice this, but she also gives Pym particles to Thanos. And so a lot of fans were wondering about this one, and Joe Russo, one of the directors, gave this answer that Ma actually, who's one of his, what are they called?
Lackeys or whatever.
Yeah, there's another name for them, but like his main followers helped Thanos mass produce the Pym particles and give them to everyone in his army. So that's the explanation the director's giving us. So I guess we got to go with that one. So yeah, I don't know. That was just one that always confused me.
Yeah,
how exactly it worked.
I don't know. That's one of those. For me, that's one of those. It's a comic book thing. Comic books always get weird with time and time travel and multiple universes and realities and all this other stuff. The other thing about time travel, and this is going to get a little deep, but it was one thing that I was going to mention with Harry Potter too, and I kind of forgot. But time travel, it kind of depends on your view of how time works. Because like going into the future at all, how does that happen? If time is linear, chronological. How does that happen? You can't.
Hmm.
How do you go see things that we haven't done yet? Theoretically, that stuff doesn't exist, right?
Hmm.
So how does that even work at all? Then you have to start looking into other theories of how time works. There's the string theory stuff. There's is time actually relative? I've been
Hmm.
watching a lot of. I was actually watching some documentaries this week about space and space travel, and one's about black holes. And they talk about how as you get closer to a black hole, time slows down for you because of the effect of gravity to the point where if you Josh are in a black hole like at the and I'm looking at you from outside of it, you don't appear to move for me at all, but you're still moving. So I
Yeah.
mean, in that
That
idea, time is relative for us because it's still moving for you, but not for me. Looking at you,
and that actually plays a big part in Interstellar.
Yeah, that's
Christopher
what I was
Nolan.
thinking too. Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Because I mean, you get
Hmm.
close to that singularity point, which they
Yeah.
talked about in the documentary. Yeah, that and I'll tell you that I want to watch Interstellar again too after watching that because that
Yeah.
the first time I watched that blew my mind also.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, getting back to what I was saying earlier, it's like time is very tricky to understand when you start um, throwing time travel into it, and exactly how does that work, the fundamentals of it, how does it work, you know. Um, so their army's moving into the future. Even the whole thing with Captain America. So you have that to talk about next, but
Hmm.
use this to transition into that. Even the thing with Captain America. How does that work with him living in the past and then coming back, and it's the whole thing it's set up for what you can call plot holes, but again, that's all what you can tolerate as a
Yeah,
viewer.
it's very very relative and like what your point of view is.
Yeah,
And I guess the basis of time travel in Endgame is basically that each time that you change something in the past, it creates basically a new timeline. It basically creates like I don't know if I want to call it like a parallel universe, but an alternate kind of reality. Like a new timeline basically. Um, and so what I always wondered was how exactly did Captain America, first of all, how did he return all the stones to all the different times and places? And, he had to go to different planets. He had to go to Vormir. For the Soul Stone, he had to go to, different. I just wondered how he did all that. And I guess if he had enough Pym particles, he could set different destinations and times and go to them. Um, but what was interesting to me, another thing that Joe Russo said that um, every decision you made in the past could potentially create a new timeline. For example, the old Cap at the end of the movie, he lived his married life in a different universe from the main one. He had to make another jump back to the main universe at the end to give the shield to Sam. Now, I thought what happened was when he returned all the stones, it returned everything back to one timeline because when they took the stones out, it created separate timelines. And I thought when he put the stones back, it would go back to that one timeline and he would live through that one timeline and grow old and then see them at the end of the movie.
I always thought
But
you just caught up to them.
right, I thought he just like caught up with them in the main
Yeah,
timeline. But what I looked up today, I think it was Joe Russo who was actually saying that he had to make another jump back to the main timeline to give the shield to Sam. I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And again, that's just how you view time. Joe Russo's looking at it differently.
Hmm.
We're setting up different timelines and different realities. I was looking at it a little bit different. Like you said with you, I was just looking at he just kind of did what he had to do, and then he waited it out and caught it up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you also have two caps running around there, at some
Right.
points also.
Right. Yep. Could make for future storytelling with Chris Evans coming back. Who knows?
Yeah,
Um,
who knows? Um, I had one more that I didn't have written down, but I wanted to toss this
okay.
one off you. Pirates of the Caribbean. When the pirates first kind of make their fall in Port Royal, and you had the one with the wooden eye, and the other one I forget their names.
Hmm.
Uh, but they kind of go into scare Elizabeth, and the whole puppet thing.
Yeah.
and then she empties the bed, the heater, whatever that thing is with the hot coals that
Hmm.
goes under her blanket or whatever to warm the blanket, whatever it is. I guess it's the 1700s version of an electric blanket or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But then she dumps the hot coals on them, and they go, "Ouch! It's burning! It's burning!" But then later
Mhm.
we find out that they can't actually feel anything.
Right.
That one's always kind of stuck out to me a little bit.
Yeah, I have two thoughts about that. My first is, do we know that they definitely don't feel any pain?
Yeah,
Any.
because Barbosa says a few times that you can't. That I think during that dinner with Elizabeth,
Hmm.
the whole the apple thing, and he says that you can't feel the warmth of a woman
Oh
or all this
yeah,
other
yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
He
yeah,
just
yeah.
can't feel anything, and then the very end, the last thing
Uh-huh.
he can feel is he feels cold.
Right, you're right. Okay. Good call on that. My other thought I had as you were talking about that was, could they have been, I don't know, could they have been faking it to like not reveal their secret of what they were, or
Maybe. See, that's
I
the
don't
thing.
know.
Like,
That was
that's the thing. I don't think there is a really an explanation for that
right,
one.
right, right, right. Yeah.
Um, my only thought about that is they're just surprised, and like, have you ever done something that didn't actually hurt, and your immediate reaction is to say "ow"?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So that's the only thing
Mhm.
that I can think of for that. But
Could
then,
be.
in actuality, it's really just to hide, that reveal until later. You know,
Right.
so it's
Yeah.
not really them hiding what they are from Elizabeth. It's more, the filmmakers hiding what they are from us.
That's true. Yeah, it was, yeah. I hear you.
So I mean, but in story, for it's always bugged me a little bit.
I get it. That makes sense.
So
I never thought about that one either. Like, like at the end of the day, I really enjoyed having this discussion and breaking all these
yeah,
down. But at the end of the day, I am not a person who is bothered normally by plot holes
same.
and I actually get aggravated when people complain about these things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just enjoying the movie. I don't know.
Well, that's what I
Um,
said. That's what that's kind of where I came from with the Lord of the Rings thing. That's what really kind
mhm,
of got me to ignore the article the first time around, and then having to go back and read it later was that I see this thing about the Eagles, and it's like not the Eagles again. It's just like just let the Eagles go. It's not a plot hole. That type of thing. It actually bugged me more. That came up again instead of you know
right.
instead of the actual possibility that it was a plot hole. The thing that bugged me was that they were talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, I think the one that bothers me the most is when people are like things like the Eagles. Why didn't they just fly the Eagles to Mordor and do this? Um why didn't they just use time travel to kill Voldemort? Whatever the argument is. What kind of story or movie would that be if they just did that? So that's always my go-to.
Yeah,
Um as far as explanations go, is like, well, we wouldn't have a movie without
yeah, yeah,
making it
exactly.
challenging, and
Yeah,
yeah.
there's elements of drama and there's elements of storytelling that aren't always logical. And
Mhm.
the other thing about this is that there's also people make illogical choices sometimes. So there's that also. Going back to the pirates thing, it's illogical for them to say "ouch" it hurts, but it's also
Right.
illogical for me to just kind of bump my hand on something and that it doesn't hurt, and then my
Mhm.
brain just tells me automatically it hurt, even if it didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
because we do illogical things all the
right.
time, so there's reason to believe that a character in a story is going to make some illogical decisions we don't agree with, decisions that maybe don't make sense.
Yeah, it's easy for us to Monday morning quarterback this type of
Yeah.
stuff. Um, but anyway, just I think my main point here in all of this isn't so much that these plot holes exist, and maybe we can explain them for you and help you feel better about them. That wasn't really the point of this whole segment. The point of this was that plot holes often exist because of your experience with a movie. Your own personal journey with a movie. If you're totally a fan of something, you're possibly much more likely to either pick up on some of these explanations, these in universe or even in movie explanations, And if you're not as heavy into this, then maybe it's going to bug you a little bit more. But that's not always true either. We also talked about the Star Wars stuff that Josh and I both love, and there's still things that we pick apart a little bit here and there. And even with all these little problems that we talked about and any explanation we could give, it doesn't mean it has to make sense to you. And if it's still a plot hole to you, then it's still a plot hole to you. Just try to keep in mind that it might not always be a plot hole to someone else either. It's not set in stone.
Indeed, yeah, I agree, and it's all from your point of view, like our show is. And so this was a great topic. I'm glad you brought this one to us, Adam, because I had a lot of fun talking about it.
Nice. Let's wrap up this episode.